Okay.
Right, good morning everyone and welcome to the first session of the second day of our 2021 ELT Conference. My name is Hugh and Japes and I would like first of all to say a big thank you to our sponsors, without whom this event would not be taking place in anything like the scope that it is. So thank you to Cambridge Assessment English, Ensley Insurance, Language Cert, Macmillan Education and Trinity College London. So just a couple of words of housekeeping before we start. If the worst happens and the webinar goes dead for whatever reason, because we're kicked off as hosts, then just wait a couple of minutes and then try and use the login in order to log back into the session. We'll get it back up as soon as possible. So just in case everything goes dead. Adam's going to be giving his presentation in a minute on approaches to inclusive materials. And he will take questions at the end of his presentation. So please put any questions that you have in the Q&A box, and please keep them relevant to this topic as well, so that we can focus on the essential matters that come out from Adam's presentation. So without further ado, I will leave you in the hands of Adam. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Hugh. It's really lovely to be here, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Fine, Adam. Yep.
Brilliant. And are
you muted or are you okay?
No, sorry, I'm just doing a display thing that I don't like, but I can't change it. So that's where we are. If I seem a little bit dislocated at any point, then just it might be because of that. So apologies in advance. So welcome everyone. My name is Adam Scott. I'm a teacher trainer. I'm a materials writer, a teacher, of course, very importantly. And I'm also an ELT specialist working with different companies, and I'm ELT specialist at Sensations English. Today I'm going to be talking about approaches to inclusive global materials for learning at all levels. And just a quick overview of what that will be like. First of all, I'll go through an introduction talking about positive representations and inclusive values very briefly, just to cover that for everyone. Then I'll move on to talking about news and how to integrate equality, how to provoke critical thinking, and how to encourage intersectional approaches, or more likely how it does this. And then in terms of, we'll move on to learning and talking about the ways all learners can develop the global voices that news includes or brings into the classroom, the sensitive representations that it usually takes, and or it encourages people to take. And then we'll just round off with talking about the memorable and empowering development that news video can provide learners with and provide our classes with. So first of all, just talking about positive representations, Hewan, I'm going to have to ask you to be my eyes and ears here, because the way things are displayed, I can't see the chat very easily. So do shout out if you see anything. So I've got a quiz for everyone now, which is, does anyone know what are the characteristics that are usually identified as protected characteristics, the characteristics that when we are thinking about equality, diversity and inclusion, we should be most importantly focusing on ensuring positive representations of? Does anyone have any ideas what these 6 letters are? And I found this quite nice acronym, graders. As teachers, we're always good graders, so hopefully.
So Adam, we've got gender, age, disability, race, sexuality so far.
Brilliant.
So that gives us 5 of them.
I think, yeah, there's one more that we're missing. Does anyone know what that is? Religion.
Religion is suggested.
Yeah, so there we are. We've got gender, race, ethnicity and culture, age, disability, religion or belief, and sexual identity, or sometimes called sexual orientation. Alongside this, there are three other factors which are, or characteristics, which are, I think, actually more, they exist around and through all of these others. And I've made my own acronym SUL for them. I used to teach in the Czech Republic, and that means salt. And I think it's very useful that, for me, that idea, because it's like salt is one of those essential elements in our lives. So does anyone know what these things are, what these would be, these other characteristics or elements which need, or we should encourage positive representations of? Has anyone got any ideas? So the first one is socioeconomic background. So thinking about people's lives in terms of their position in the society in which they live. Then urban and rural realities, and those are very much part of the context in which we all operate, and linguistic diversity. And in English, of course, when we're thinking about the English classroom, we've got lots of different ways of doing that now. We're thinking about mediation and translanguaging practices of kind of accommodating and finding communication and finding meaning within a cooperative interaction with other speakers or other interlocutors. And of course, we've got the linguistic diversity of the varieties of English and the range of different Englishes which are spoken around the world. So those are some core things for us to think about in terms of positive representations. And then thinking about inclusive values, here are some key elements of inclusive inclusive values. So we've got inclusive assessment, which is about enabling people to be assessed in a way that they can participate in. So, for example, if you were using on a digital device, as we all are today, if you were using something that restricted the opportunity for people with certain extra needs to be able to complete that assessment, then that would be challenging. It's also thinking about the way in which things are laid out for the people with certain extra educational needs. Inclusive language, of course, we've just been looking at positive representations, but inclusive language goes much further in terms of how we talk about the people and the situations that we're looking at. Universal design for learning is that idea of making sure that there are enough opportunities for people to reflect, people to act, and people to explore the different content that they're looking at. So not just having one line through. It's not the same as learning styles, but if you want to know more about that, just Google universal design for learning and you'll find much more. Access and engagement, thinking about allowing people into those spaces, allowing people into that learning opportunity, regardless of their particular needs, and engagement, being connected to that that content that you're studying, finding it really connects with what they are interested in. We've got special educational needs, which as teachers we're already quite aware of. Anticipatory adjustments, and this is where we think ahead of ourselves and think about what may come up, what needs students may have, and dealing with those in the way in which we present materials or content, and the way in which we then manage the activities that we're using to help students to learn or develop understanding of that content. Then we've got neurodiversity and the number of different ways in which people are able or not able to access and process information. And that goes back to universal design for learning as well, and attempts to accommodate that. And then at the end, something for us is the level of English, because news is often something which we'll be looking at, is often something which is only reserved for higher levels because of the challenge of the language which it's presented in. And so I want to think about level of English being one of those aspects which is often with the news a barrier to certain levels of learners enjoying or making use of that content for learning. Moving on now, I think thinking about news, it really integrates equality in a way which makes it very easy for us to use it to present very inclusive teaching. And talking about that, I mean, it's objective. Good news, anyway, attempts to be objective. Now, I know this is a complicated concept, and it's the intention of trying to be objective, which is important here. And part of that is sensitive representations of the characters, the people with and the situations within that news item. And okay, we're not talking about the British right-wing tabloid press here. So I wouldn't recommend using that with a student to get a sensitive representation of everybody. But when news is created with this wish to be objective, then it does embody that kind of notion. And we saw that last year really with the battles in the United States between the right-wing media and the like CNN and stuff like that. It's also, news is also global. And that means that it's global in coverage and global in voices, again, making it easier for us to actually help students to learn through accessing these situations or these speakers and people who are actually wanting, who actually relate to the student's own environment or connect with the student's own ideas. There's something very personal that we'll come on to in a minute about that. It's also accessible when you make the news multi-level and multi-sensory in terms of video, and we'll be watching a few examples today of that. And it's also relatable because news at its core is always person-centered. Even if it's a story about the environment, predominantly about the environment, the news is always looking for a human angle to it, to make it connect with the audience. And therefore it's really helping us to do our job of helping to engage students, because person-centered content is relatable. So the other thing that news does is really provoke critical thinking. The focus of the news with its person-centered content provides particular examples or specific examples of universal themes, things that students can relate to from their own context or transfer into their own situation or imagine within their own physical space. The effects of that news is to connect our life experience to the content in the news item, and to encourage the development of schema as we seek to, as a learner, or as a person watching the news, as we seek to understand it, we connect it to our knowledge of different topic areas, our experience of life, and also we look for equivalents from our own worldview. So all of this leads us into the realm of critical thinking, evaluation, and comparison very quickly. So it really makes it easier for us to achieve those things which are sometimes harder to get to in English language classrooms. We'll come on to that in a little bit of time, but I'd like you to first of all just watch how this one video about a beatboxing Buddhist monk is able to do some of these things at elementary and then as advanced. So I want you to watch the elementary first, just because if we watch it the other way around, and I thought long and hard about this, we kind of lose the impact of the elementary because we've already processed the information. So as you're watching, just have a think about what you notice about the news formats, positive representations, inclusive values, and its language content. And also think about how could you use this video for critical thinking. So hopefully you'll be able to hear. Can you just tell me if you can hear okay when I play this? Can you hear?
Yogetu Agasaka is from Japan. He is a Buddhist monk. He usually helps families when someone dies. The lockdown stopped his work, so he made new Buddhist music during lockdown. Akasaka likes beatboxing. He makes music with his mouth. Now he is mixing beatboxing with Buddhist songs. Lots of people listen to his music on YouTube. He is happy about this.
I just realized that I can just spread my stuff not only in Japan but to in the world.
Akasaka wasn't always a Buddhist monk. He started when he was 30 years old. He hopes young people will listen to his music. He hopes they become interested in Buddhism.
So maybe if my music attracts younger people, it'll be a good opportunity for them to know about the Buddhism.
So now here comes the same news item at C1.
Beatboxing monk Yogetu Akasaka is mixing it up on YouTube after the coronavirus pandemic put a halt to his usual monastic work. During lockdown, Akasaka swapped officiating funerals and memorial services for laying down beats and looping mantras. Having been beatboxing for 15 years, he now combines his vocal percussion with traditional religious Buddhist chants. His Heart Sutra looping remix has already racked up almost 1 million views, giving the musical monk a new insight into the power of breaks and beats.
I just realized that I can just spread my stuff not only in Japan but to in the world.
With Japanese youth often associating Buddhism with death and funeral rites, Akasaka hopes his music will give them a fresh perspective on the religion.
So maybe if my music attracts younger people, it'll be a good opportunity for them to know about the Buddhism.
Okay, so back to that. Just share a comment in the chat about an observation about the news format or an idea about how to use this video for critical thinking. I can just see a question in there from Martin about confused about where you've sourced the 2 different listenings. Actually, this is a video from Sensations English, and we script the 2 different listenings we script 5 different levels of listening for each video so that it's graded for the student's level, so that each video script gradually increases the level of the content. So it's it's made for the video. It's all made together. Okay, so I've got, as teachers, we can make a video class for students, yeah. And the relationship between marketing and celebrity, I really like that idea. An idea of the simple life. Critical thinking, how you feel about mixing modern ideas with religion. Great, lots of good ideas there. I'm just going to show you what one teacher has done. And I'll read this because it's a little bit long. I did the Beatboxing Buddhist monk story with youngish learners, just 12 years old, with the aim of getting their critical thinking going about religion, not their religious views, but religion itself. It went really well. I got to see them as more colourful thinkers. I think this is really important. News really helps us to get there with that. I felt that I had given them a blank sheet to colour with their opinions as a break from their typical English classes. It also drew my attention to some of the students' grey thinking based on stereotypes. Other students in the class even called them up on this, encouraging them to think more colourfully, i.e. to recognise and avoid stereotyping. It definitely gave me more insight into how their minds work. And I think this is really important for us as teachers, because this is what we want to do. We're constantly monitoring, trying to get understanding about how our students are processing language or wanting to use language or interpreting content. And this higher order thinking skills, critical thinking, really gives us a route into that, because students are using language generatively and creatively in ways in which they want to express themselves. So lots of good ideas there. And so I'd like to just then move on to have a quick look. I mentioned higher order thinking, quick look at Bloom's taxonomy, because Bloom's reports the news is hot. Thinking about, I've put at the very bottom of the taxonomy decoding, because I think that's an important part for our learners, which the general taxonomy doesn't deal with. Then we've got remembering, understanding, and applying what we've understood. Then we move on to analysing, evaluating, and creating. And so we've got the lower order thinking skills we're very good at introducing and using in our classrooms, but then we kind of often reach a ceiling before we get to the higher order thinking skills, and it becomes quite an effort for learners. And I've put up all of these different verbs just here. I just want to step up between them one by one. So we start with the decoding, listening, reading, viewing, watching, processing the sounds or letters into units of meaning. And with watching, we've got the visual content, it's multisensory, so we're supporting comprehension in decoding in other ways. Then we've got remembering, defining, duplicating, listing, recalling those facts or ideas, in our case, the grammar, the vocabulary, how to put it together, and then understanding, classifying, describing, discussing, etc., explaining ideas or concepts, and applying, demonstrating, executing, solving, using. That's the one that's really important for us in the classroom, using the information in a new situation. And that would be our productive practice of anything that we've studied in a language system. Then we move on to compare, differentiate, examine, experiment, organize, question, drawing connections among ideas. And this is what I was talking about before, where everything's kind of a particular example of a universal, or it's encouraging connection with that context. Then appraise, critique, defend, judge, select, support. That's really about having a discussion of ideas, examining information, making judgments, whether that's on paper or in a conversation. And then finally, author, design, construct, develop, formulate, and investigate, using that information to create something new. And this is where often I have found in my teaching career that students sometimes need a lot more stimulus than we often kind of hope they will. And this is where news really provides that very immediately. So moving on now, thinking about encouraging intersectional focuses on when we're dealing with content in the class, and when we're looking at news. And I couldn't find any kind of image except for intersectional, except for this one of a kind of spaghetti junction. But I think it's a nice metaphor for how the news brings different threads or different elements of life together, because they are all together anyway. They are not siloed in these different areas. So news richly contextualizes people and places. It presents positive representations of lives when it's attempting to be objective, and it's bringing in those real world issues which are complex and intersectional. So can you remember the graders and Sul, what they are? Keep them in mind, just a reminder of those. And then it also connects to learners' experiences, learners' ideas and learners' concerns, and deals with the real world use of language and ideas to discuss and share and have present new ideas or solutions for these kinds of situations that news presents. So I'm going to show you two short clips of a video now. They're just about a minute long each. They're both about the environment. So as you're watching these, I'd just like you to sit back and watch them. I've got a question for you afterwards. This is at A2 and the other one is at B1.
Singapore is one of the smallest countries in the world, but it produces a lot of carbon dioxide. This hurts the environment. The government wants to start using renewable energy. The best option for Singapore is solar power, but this is difficult in such a small country. Sembcorp is an energy company in Southeast Asia. It is solving Singapore's space problem. Sembcorp is placing solar farms on water. Jen Tan is Senior Vice President of Sembcorp.
So after exhausting the rooftops, the available land, which is very scarce, the next big potential is actually our water area. And we have got many reservoirs in Singapore that we can do floating, dual use, floating and reservoir at the same time.
Tolstoy the elephant roams the southern Kenyan wilderness. He has survived droughts and illegal ivory hunters for almost 50 years. However, he now faces an even more dangerous threat, the avocado. The popularity of avocados in wealthy countries has increased year after year. Last year, agricultural business Kiliavo Fresh was given permission to plant avocados on Kenyan land, which it bought from the local Maasai people. The planned farm is close to a national park where many elephants live. Environmental groups say the farm will have a huge impact on the elephants. Daniel Ole Sambu from the Big Life Foundation is concerned about where the elephants will reproduce.
There are two farms there, and both of them are exactly in the middle of a wildlife dispersal area.
Okay, so thinking about those two videos, what elements of positive representations did you see there, and how did it connect to the idea of learners' own experiences, or how could it connect to the idea of learners' own experiences, ideas and concerns? I'll leave that question with you because I'm conscious of time, but for me there was the idea of all of the Sulu part was totally there. There was the idea of socioeconomic backgrounds, the idea of urban and rural realities, and the idea of linguistic diversity, those global English speakers using English. And so that's how, for me, that really pervades all of the news reports, those additional characteristics, and really supports our engagement in positive representations and inclusive learning through using news. So then I'd like us to think about, when we're talking about using news, which I've been doing for quite a while, or news video, the ways in which all learners can develop using these kinds of resources. So first of all, it's multisensory content, which is accessible at all levels in this, the content that I'm showing you from Sensations English, but because of those 5 different levels, and that allows for scaffolding and differentiation. You can use the same video, but if you've got a mixed ability class with different levels, and the whole class can still operate together because the information contained within it is the same. And also you can use that for scaffolding, because if you use the level below, that gives you the same information laid out in a simpler way, which can build confidence. And if a level is a little bit easy for a student, or they find that that topic area is very good for them, then the level above will be able to scaffold and stretch them, because everything is carefully constructed so that there's new words are introduced with a rich context and co-text, so that meaning is more likely to be derived through the associations that students are making with the other words, and the visuals which are around them as well. Also, thinking about how you can use the video in the class. It can be used for receptive skills development, as we would with listening or reading, richly contextualized study of grammar, and I'll show you an example of that later, but meaning that we have to do a lot less of the legwork with building concept, because students are already getting a very clear context for the use of the language from the video news. And you know, news is very clearly about explaining situations, so it gives you that in a very clear way. Also focusing on collocations, lexical items, and upgrading language, as we can see from the upgrading of language within each level. And for pronunciation, for listening and decoding, and I'll come on to that later, but there's a lot of, both with the newsreaders language and with the global English speakers. And the access to global English speakers is scaffolded through the whole context of news and the information which is being presented, so that then the reach to try and understand another accent or gain awareness of the characteristics of another variety is not so far, and it's not isolated. Also, you can use this content for springboards for discussion or writing work, relatable contexts for project work. I always think about the piece of wasteland that you have to design into a community resource that's a common one across mainstream and EFL and ESL. And this brings it much more into real life. You've got a situation in a news video, and then you build a relatable, similar context for yourself in your project work. You can use them as stimuli for research and mediation. Now, mediation is really a key tool we're trying to bring into learning more and more. So one of the things I do with students is take a news article, news video, and then after we've worked on it, say, okay, now find a similar story in your own language, go on your phones, get that story, and then explain it to someone else in English. Be the mediator of that information from your language into English. And then opportunities to grow translanguaging skills. And these are really key skills around how interlocutors communicate when they're coming from different varieties or different regions even, or different social spheres as well. So it's all of those soft skills which enable communication across and between languages. And you can use all of this for warmers and plenary discussions. I love Jamie Keddy's storytelling work, and you can use this with that. Flipped learning works really well with news as well. It can be the basis or the model for presentations and reports, and it can also develop confidence for listening and speaking, because you're giving such a lot of rich content, which is then able to be taken up by the students because it's so accessible into the language that they're using, and giving them rich resources for their own speaking. Just in terms of embedded and contextualized language, remembering the elephant versus avocado script from B1, I've just put 3 pieces of grammar here which are embedded. Has survived for present perfect for extended states, has increased year after year for, again, a change which has happened. We've got the passive here, was given permission, and then 2 relative clauses, and all of that is embedded within just one half of that video. And so there's so much richly contextualized language, and language never appears on its own. You know, we don't have 10 first conditionals at the same time. So this is really seeing language as it's more authentically presented. And then below that, thematic or contextualized lexis, all of that lexis around the environment coming together with this specific context of the avocado versus elephant, it's creating a lexical set which you wouldn't normally have brought together, and it's increasing the range of vocabulary that your students are getting access to at one time. And just thinking about this and how that worked, another teacher said, we put the language from the 2 practice activities on the board, and students had to reconstruct the report as much as possible using the language they had learned. The students seemed to enjoy the activity and used the language well in reconstructing the report. They were engaged with the material and managed to use the language well in follow-up activities. And this, for me, is the really important thing, that students are able then to want to share ideas and to pull on the resources from the video news to actually help them to share those ideas. So that, for me, is a really important element of why using news is so accessible, because it creates this critical thinking, this need to share your own ideas and to suck up the vocabulary and grammar which has presented those ideas and reuse it, recycle it in your own productive speaking as a learner. So we're going to have a quick look at this. Actually, I think I'm going to skip this because we just won't have time. This would be an exercise for you to do, to watch this video and consider what ways you would use this news video with a B2 class, and thinking about positive representations and inclusive values represented or embedded in the report. So we can't do this now, but you can do this with any news video that you use with your students. So just take these questions away with you, so that they are what you bring to your planning with any of these, with any news video for a group of learners. So sorry to skip through this. Thinking about global voices, learners really appreciate seeing themselves and others represented in the video, in news videos, in speaking, and in the topics which are being discussed. Students are also able to explore concepts of intelligibility and what that means in terms of accent and variety. And they also become much more familiar with varieties and accents. And you can have an open discussion in class about what was easy or hard to understand. And you'll see the diversity within the classroom of, maybe you'll have a majority who found something difficult and then a few who found it easy. And there's a discussion to have there between those students about why. So you start to open up these skills such as listening, which are normally quite closed within the learner. And this helps students to relax around pronunciation as well. You know, gone are the days of the model. I spent the last couple of years in my classrooms never giving a model to students, asking them to be the models and then helping each other to see the variety within those voices and see which were intelligible and which weren't. And this is another way of helping students to relax around pronunciation. Developing decoding and translanguaging strategies as well. How would you react to that person in a conversation? How would you try and get the understanding that you needed? And what do you need to focus on in terms of decoding to improve your oral processing of speech sound? So just having a look at a couple of examples of speech here from all over the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful first day here in Antarctica. Be sure to dress up warmly and enjoy.
So that was a second language user speaking in a very controlled way over an announcement, over a tannoy, but that was in Antarctica. So these voices are not just geographically located, they occur all over the world, as is an element of global English.
He was not arrested, but we asked him to leave the booth and to leave the fair, and we have his contact and everything, so we can go further, but I don't think we will.
So that was an example of a French woman speaking at an art fair in America. So I'm just going to skip through the rest of these because we're running out of time here. And so thinking about global voices, we're decoding the stream of speech. We're thinking about the areas of focus for intelligibility and the features of that messy, spontaneous speech. This all goes back to Richard Caldwell and his 2018 culmination of a lot of his research, which is a syllabus for listening, and I can only recommend that to everybody. Just as a part of that, I'm going to drop a link into the chat, which is a link to this, which I have made, thinking about some key aspects for dealing with what he calls the blur gap, what the difference between what people think they say, what the sound that comes out, and then what people actually receive through their ears and how they interpret that. And that starts with, at the top right, identifying key words, thinking about stress, thinking about how many words you hear in a chunk of speech. What did you notice about the speech, and how many sounds, digging down to that bottom-up processing of how many sounds there are. And I'll drop that link into the chat for you now so that you can do that. Have a look at that yourself in your own time. I'm conscious that we're running out of time, so this is the end though, don't worry. So in general, I wanted to summarize by saying that graded news video gives really memorable and empowering development for learners. It allows all students to access real world content and context, brings together many aspects of life and identity, contextualizes language really purposefully, and develops language skills, soft skills, and really importantly, schema for holding all of that together. So thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, I realize we've not got much time, but I'm happy to answer them. And I just wanted to let you know that if you go to sensationsenglishwebinars.co.uk, we've got 4 speakers doing webinars during May on using video in ELT. So check those out. Keep in touch with me on the socials as well. Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That was wonderful. I love the way you sort of melded an approach to inclusive materials with listening strategies and showing that they're not either or, but mutually complementary and definitely enhance students' language learning. So that was great. A few questions.
Me, that's my life.
It's your life, indeed. It has been for the last few years, I think. So a few questions have come in. I'll pick out a few of them as we've got a couple of minutes now.
And I promise to be brief.
Yes. Can you repeat the name of the storyteller you recommended, and what's the ideal length of a transcript to share with students? So
Jamie Keddy is the guy who's all about ELT storytelling. You can find him online, Jamie Keddy, Keddie. And the ideal length is, not much more than 2 minutes, basically. It's short enough for students to be able to absorb the information, to give the opportunity to listen or watch maybe a few times, or read, because I should have said this is it's neurodiversity. All of these things come with a transcript, they come with an audio, and they're video form. So there's a lot of diverse ways in which you can access that content then. But yeah, maximum about 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. How about what are anticipatory adjustments? I think you mentioned that at an early point in the talk, and how can you do that essentially?
So yeah, if you think about when you were doing your first lesson planning and you were asked to think about your anticipated problems and solutions, it would kind of fall into that general area of your planning, thinking about things which may be a challenge for learners. One of the things to think about is trigger warnings, the idea that certain things may be distressing for some students, and giving them the option to kind of prepare themselves for that. Anything which is going to block, that could block learning for stress reasons, but anything which is going to block learning or block access to learning because of the environmental or the class-based situation that you're putting people into. So if text is too small, for example, can it be enlarged? There's if text is if there's something which is only text, can it be can you have a screen reader if your vision is not very good? All of those kinds of things, with subtitles also having closed captions where you get the descriptions of any noises that are going on which aren't language. Those are the kind of things that would fall into anticipatory adjustments.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. So that's the end of the first session. A big thank you to Adam from everyone. And the next session will be at 10 o'clock. After that, there's a break, and you can join us in the Zoom for a chat if you want to in the break time as well. So please do that if you wish to, grab a cup of coffee and then join the Zoom call. But otherwise, I'll say adieu to this session. Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks very much. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. I'll see you around. Bye.